Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi Trumais. We are starting today at the end of the 10th chapter, Perek Yud Halacha Vav, and beginning the final chapter in the Masechta, Perek Yud Aleph, starting with Halacha Aleph. We're learning today Daf Tzadik Ches, and we left off on Tzadik Ches Amud Aleph, all the way on top of the Amid Mamish, Make Kivashim. Now, the Mishnah taught us that waters in which vegetables of truma vegetables were soaked or cooked, those waters for sure may not be consumed by non-koyanim because they have the status of truma and aser lazarim. And the Gemara is going to challenge that by bringing in a whole different inyan. When it comes to the shear of a mikvah, you have to start out with a minimum of 40 sa'ah of rainwaters. And the Mishnah tells you that if you did not yet reach that amount, even if it's only minus a drop, if at that point 3 loig or more of mayim shu'uvim were added to the mikvah, it completely disqualifies everything that was there. I know this is a din derabanan, but that's the din. If less than 3 loig of mayim shu'uvim fell in, those waters cannot be added to the 40 sa. But they don't invalidate everything that's there. But 3 loig of mayim shu'uvim, if you don't yet have 40 sa of make shamim, it invalidates all of those waters. Now, this halacha is only regarding water. All other liquids, wine, oil, fruit juices, even though the mayim, the make shamim were not 40 sa, and you had 3 loig of wine or fruit juice that were added to the mikvah, loy malin v'loy poislin. Again, you don't include them. They don't make up to the shear, but they don't invalidate the shear. This is a basic din in mikvahs. And the problem we'll have is that the Gemara in the Kasha and the Havamina will point out a inherent contradiction between that halacha and the halacha we have over here. And some of the way the Gemara will resolve it will be some insight that we will get. B'negei hilchos brachos. What bracha do you make, as we'll speak out when we finish this Perek? That will be the top of the Amid. Perek Yud Aleph is all about the pasuk in Parshas Koirach, in which the Torah says, "Va'ani hine nosati locha esh mishmeres terumoisai." We quoted this pasuk before, that Hashem says, "Behold, I have given to you," meaning to the Kohanim, the safeguard of my trumos, which means that we are obligated to safeguard truma, forbidden to destroy truma, forbidden to cause truma to go to waste. And based on that, the Mishnah will discuss various practices, some of which will be okay, and some of which will be not be okay. Just as an example, can you add spices into truma wine? Yes. Can you perfume truma oil? We'll see no. I'll explain when we learn the Mishnah why not. Because when you add spices that have a aromatic smell into oil, I know the kavanah aromatic. You want for that smell to go into the oil, but those herbs absorb the oil. And when you finish imbuing the aroma in the oil, the way it worked is that you would remove the spices. But when you remove the spices, you're going to remove some of the oil that was absorbed in the spices. And even though this was the normal way of doing it, just as an example, that will be something that you're not allowed to do with truma oil because you're not safeguarding it. Now, the Mishnah will open up speaking about another minig. We're going to have a lot of food prep. They used to put figs into fish sauce. Anything that's fishy has a fishy smell, and adding of the figs in it somehow neutralized or countered. Are you allowed? Are you not allowed? The Mishnah says you're not allowed. The Gemara is going to actually point out in a Braisa that you are allowed, and we're going to go into all of these nuances, when yeah, and when not. I want to give one big klal, and that is the following, that any placement, any mixture of items, let's go to the fish sauce, if the kavana is laha'avir zuhama, if the purpose is to neutralize bad odors, that will generally be more problematic if you are using truma to do that. Even though the truma is neutralizing a bad odor, you're wasting it. If you are adding, let's say, spices of truma in order to add sweet flavor, if it's for the flavor, that will be something that will be permitted. And that will be a big cloud that will give insight into various arguments in the Tanoim and in the Amoyroyim. And the final topic that we will learn today is whether a Yid is allowed to buy murias, fish sauce, from a goy. I know nowadays when we commercialize items, the accepted norm is that everything has to have a hashgacha. It wasn't always that way. Certain items that its ingredients were known, then you can get it. The issue is we know that you're not allowed to buy murias, this fish sauce from goyim. And the Gemara will point out that there is really, based on what we will be learning, two different ways of understanding the prohibition. There is a chashash that the goyim added wine into murias. It was not uncommon for wine to be added. Wine was added to remove the fishy odor, to neutralize the flavor. But as we will see today, some Tanoim will be of the opinion that even though wine was added, if the purpose was for it to neutralize the odor, the wine is considered nullified, which is why you can't use truma wine, lahaver zuhama. But lekula, you will not have an issue of yain nesach, even though there's some wine in there. Doesn't matter. There's another issue, and that is bishulakum mishum chasnus, has nothing to do with yain nesach, that fish brines were perhaps cooked, and if they were cooked, especially certain types that cannot be eaten if they are raw, as we'll speak out, that will be a problem midrabanan, and that is today's daf. Chevra daf tzadik ches. We are entering into the 10th final daf in the Masechta. Meikivashim. Again, the Mishnah told you that regardless the status of the other pickled item, that our Tana actually was of the opinion that other than the few exceptions, the flavor from one veggie does not go into the other vegetable when you pickle them together, according to our girsa, not Rabbi Yochanan's girsa. But the Mishnah points out at the end, but the waters themselves in which truma vegetables were pickled, they do have in them the flavor of truma. They have the status of truma, and therefore they are usher to a non-kohen. So asks the Gemara on this rule. Hamon Taninon over there is in reference to a Mishnah in Pedig Zayin, Mesachtas Mikvois. Elu Poislim Eloi Malin. As we spoke out on the words of introduction, if you don't yet have 40 saw of Make Shamim, and in addition fell in Mayim Shu'uvim. So if Mayim Shu'uvim fell in the amount of 3 lug, not less, then not only is it not Malin, Mela, but it actually invalidates everything that was there. And that's even if you had 39 saw 0.9. Chabal, everything gets ruined. Now the waters that are Mayim Shu'uvim that invalidate will invalidate whether they are pure, whether they are impure. Makes no difference. Another example, says the Mishnah, that will be the kasha, Mei Kivashim Umei Shalakos, water in which vegetables were pickled or cooked. Now, what do we see from over here? I want to tell you, you know what liquids do not invalidate a mikvah? Yayin. You know what liquids do not invalidate a mikvah? Mei Pedis. Now, I know we're making a stretch. If our Mishnah says that a non-kohen cannot have these waters, why not? It's water. It's water that benegeya, the dinim of truma, they are like Mei Pedis. In other words, what's the problem? The problem is that prior to you drinking it, someone put in there vegetables of truma, but they removed the vegetables. No, but the tam is in there. I know it's 2 different topics, but let's go with the Havamin. It's the same topic. So you see that the waters are considered fruit juice, vegetable juice. If it's considered vegetable juice, just for the record, if you take a vegetable and you put it in the, in today's grinders, and you throw and a keli and 3 lug, and you throw it into the mikvah, you will not invalidate the mikvah. But nevertheless, mekavashim and meishulakos do invalidate the mikvah. That will be the kasha. From here, you see that benegeya hilchos mikvahs, these waters are considered mayim. They're not considered meipedes. Continuing in the Mishnah, temed. Temed is a inferior wine. In other words, you take grape seeds or you take other shmarim sediment and you soak them in water. Those waters become colored with the grape. It's called temed. And you can have those waters as they are prior to them fermenting, and you can have these waters as they are post-fermenting. You will never make a bayre pri agafen. It's not called yayin, it's called temed. But concerning our halachas, here the Mishnah differentiates that when you have this temet, if acheloi hechmitz, then it's bonafide mayim, and therefore 3 loig of temet will passel the mikvah. But if the temet already fermented, it's amazing. Even though it's not yayin, then it has the status of not mayim, and it cannot invalidate the mikvah. End of quote. Asks the Gemara, over here, you are making the mekavashim into food, which is the only reason why a non-kohen cannot eat it. But over here in mikvois, you consider it mashke means you consider it water. And the Gemara gives 2 answers. I would assume what most people are thinking, how can you compare dinim of the flavor, tam ke'ikir? That's the second answer. The first answer, the Gemara says, Amar Rav Manam, a big chiddush. That it's not such a hard and fast rule that mekivashim are usher to a non-kohen. It has to do with the quality of these waters. Did they become thick or are they still thin? However, that's defined. Kan over here, why may a non-kohen not eat it? Only because the waters became kashin. Kashin doesn't mean hard. Kashin means thick. Thick and cloudy. That's what the commentators say. Kan and mikvahs, what type of mekivashim still invalidate the mikvah? If you have 3 loig, berakin is when they are loose. In other words, kan over here, since the waters became kashin, that's why they have a status of oichel. And it's oichel of truma. Kan and mesachtas mikvahs, since the waters are still loose, b'mashkem. Now that's a huge chiddush. You're qualifying the Mishnah here, you're qualifying the Mishnah there. Then there's always the question that comes post-Talmudic era, how do you define thick? How do you define thin? That's not a kasha. That's the Chazal didn't go to that point. Now the Gemara gives a whole different approach. And this other approach is very negea, like I mentioned in Hilchas Brachis, Birchas Hanehenen. Amar Rabbi Yossi berabun. No. Afilu teimar kan v'kan v'koshin or kan v'kan v'raken. No difference. Thick or thin. Difference is that the reason behind our Mishnah, it has to do with the rule of tam ke'ikir. Kan over here, noisnin ta'amim, the criteria, the concern, whether it does have the flavor, whether it doesn't have the flavor, is a unique din when it comes to macholas asuras. Based on the rule that tam ke'ikir, I want to know if there's a tam. And the Mishnah is giving you a rule that when you pickle vegetables in water, the waters have in them the tam of that vegetable. If that vegetable is truma, so there is the tam of truma. Tam ke'ikir will also mean a non-kohen cannot eat it. When it comes to hilchos mikvos, we don't care about the tam. It's not about the tam. V'haraya, the Gemara doesn't say it. Try to taste the mikvah that you're going into. You tell me. Not today, mamish, with the filters. When I was in yeshiva, I promise you, you're not allowed to make a bracha on it. But the mikvah they told us was still kosher. Is the charaya that the mikvah has nothing to do with the tam. Tam v'reach. The ein nois than tam b'mikvah. So that's a very big rule. Now I want to say the following. I'm going back to the first answer. It's the first answer, koshin and rakin. Now I know that Birchas Hanehenen is a very difficult area in halacha. Even for us, the Alter Rebbe wrote his Seder, Hilchos Birchas Hanehenen, actually 3 times. And, you have great people like the Rabbi Zajac Shlita who can mamish tell you exactly all of the nafkaminas and halacha between this one and between that one. But generally, theoretically, there is a nafkamina in halacha whether something is thick or whether something is thin. And even though it's not exactly the topic here, don't forget the topic here is where you soak vegetables in water, but then you remove the vegetables. But I'm making a little bit of a comparison. What happens if you take a fruit or a vegetable and you grind it up to the point where it's mamash a liquid? What bracha do you make on it? What bracha do you make on apple kompot? Now, vadai, if you have pieces of apple in there, for sure you make a better pre-8. That's no question about it. What happens if there's no pieces at all? So then, some paskin, it has to do whether it's kosher or rakin, mamish. That if it's thick, however that's defined, you still make a ha'etz. And only when it's completely rakin, when it's completely liquidy, do you make a shahakol.
Yeah, because otherwise it's a puree. It's not a liquid anymore. Your question was when you grind up to a form of a liquid, then it's shahakol.
Correct. And if it's thicker, even though there isn't a single piece of apple, even if you cannot see the apple in it, what I'm saying now is not according to everyone. I know according to the Mishnah Berurah, if you don't see a piece of apple, if I remember correctly, we don't paskin like him, so I don't remember. When I was in that yeshiva over there, they would put pieces of apple. There wouldn't be pieces of apple. They would have a question, what bracha you make. And I know that we don't paskin that way in theory. We don't need to have a be'en of the apple. It has to be however you define thick. When you're saying the word puree, I don't know how you define thick. I know when it comes to doughs, there the Shulchan Aruch defines. Like, from what dough do you have to remove challah? Like when you make a cake, like how does that work? It has to do whether the dough pours or not. That's the definition. Pouring meaning it can be thick, but it pours. That I understand. And the dough from which you make bread does not pour. You make them, and again, hamoitzi and mezainis. Same thing. It has a lot to do with that. Aside of the tzura sapas issue later. Okay, we'll leave it at that. On that we say Hadran Aloch Batzal Shanesanoi, and God willing, with the great joy, we are starting the final chapter, the 11th chapter. I know that 11 sometimes is viewed as a non-holy number, right? Eser v'loy Tesha, Eser v'loy Achadesrei. But as we have so many Maimarim of the Rebbe on Asher, the Rebbe was born on Yud Aleph Nissen, on the Yud Aleph Samamanim, that actually the highest level is 10 plus 1, and that is what we have in Trumais. It's Taka Holy Masechta. And the Masechta, at least, will begin by focusing on the obligation that God gave to Kohanim. Va'ani, hine, God tells you, behold, I gave you as mishmeres truma. So I gave you the obligation to safeguard my truma. Safeguarding the truma doesn't only mean not to make it tummy. It means not to ruin it, or not to cause it to get ruined. Now, that's a difficult way. I know it sounds simple. It's not simple. So we're going to begin to apply it. And for all of the people that know how to prepare food, we have people here that think they know how to prepare food. They're going to be learning a lot of interesting tips from the Mishnah. And some of them will even disagree. I know them. But we're going to go that the Mishnah knows, the Mishnah is Torah, and whatever it is you think you know about making food, you have to readjust to what God says. So let's go. Fish, it creates a problem. Fish is taka protein and all gute Sachen. Fish is fishy. Fish is fishy. I know today I was taught you put lemon in fish. But that's not from the Mishnah. That's something that I heard from Das Balabatim. They did other things then to remove the fishy flavor. And remember what I'm saying. Ultimately, it's going to come to, if something is being used to neutralize odor, it's called lahavir zuhama. Lav dafke, it's going to be allowed if you are using truma. Even though the truma is being used for a purpose, it's removing a fishy flavor. Guys, don't forget, fish is never truma. Speaking about using a product that's truma to put it into a fish yoyech, so it shouldn't be so fishy. If it's done lahaver zuama, we'll see it's going to be usr generally. If we understand that addition not only to neutralize odor but actually to add flavor, then it's going to be mutter because you're using it. But let's go see details now. So the Mishnah says, you're not allowed to put either a pressed fig or a dried fig inside this murias, inside this fish sauce. Why? Because you're destroying them. Now hold on. Let's go ahead. Let's read the Mara Fulda. Let's read the Mara. It's very important. And there's so many different ways of understanding it. The Mara Fulda is the second one in the new Mishnah. So he first writes, this was the common practice, at least in the times of Chazal, either a pressed fig or the dried fig, that they would put it in murias, and then lisoy chaton, while it's in the murias, they would further squeeze it out. They would press it in there so the juices of the fig should go into the murias, but they wouldn't leave it in there. This is very important. It wasn't something that was geshmak to leave in. They would then remove it. So what happens? You are destroying the fig. Very different than when they would add spices and they would leave the spices in there. Then it's being eaten. Of course, only a kohen can eat it. But here, no one is going to eat it. It was using a fig and then discarding it. So one could have argued, well, you used it. And the Mishnah is telling you, no, since it's holy, it's truma, you're using its juices. But it is going to be discarded. You can't discard truma. But what happens if you have truma wine, here you're also putting it into the murias. First of all, if we were to understand that adding wine into fish brine is only to neutralize odor, it would not be allowed. I'm telling you what the Gemara is going to say. But the Chazal understood that they would add wine into the fish sauce, not only to neutralize, but they wanted the added flavor of the wine. Here, you're not removing the wine. It's not like the fig. You're leaving the wine inside of it, so none of it is getting destroyed. Now, guys, it's self-understood. A non-Kohen will not be allowed to eat the murias. Even better for the Kahanim. It's going to last longer for them. So we're not talking about who can eat it here. We're talking about whether you are allowed to do it. There's nothing wrong with it. Again, there's a chiddush. Because if you were to view that the adding of the wine is only lahaver zuhama, even though you're leaving the wine in it, it would also be asr. Remember that. Another rule. The aim lefatmen es hashemen. You're not allowed to perfume truma oil. Here, the oil is truma. The way you perfume oil, guys, we learned this. I forgot on which Masechta. How did they make the ketores? And how did Moshe Rabbeinu make the Shemen HaMishcha, the one-time Shemen HaMishcha? So you put certain ingredients in the oil, and those ingredients give off, in part, their flavor in the oil. And then those items are removed. Now, what you're putting in the truma oil is non-truma spices. So you would ask, what's the problem? I'm putting something in the truma oil. It's making the oil upgraded. The oil is not getting ruined. The oil is getting better. Nevertheless, you're not allowed to do it. Now, why are you not allowed to do it? Look inside the Mara folder. It's around 6 lines from the bottom. It's in the middle of the, in the shtickle under the Mishnah. Why? Because when you put ikarin, when you put these herbs, right, these plants, you know what happens? Some of the oil goes into the plant. If you remember, guys, the one that Moshe Rabbeinu did, the Gemara says, first they put it in water, if you remember. They put it in water because since it was saturated with water, it did not absorb the oil. Because Moshe Rabbeinu came with the hin, remember that? He came with the exact 12 loig. And we didn't want to lose one drop of it. And we didn't want for it to go into the ikarim. But normally you don't do that. So here, you're putting the ikrei psamim inside the oil. You see what's going to the ibud? The oil that's going into the herbs, they are getting lost. That's one understanding of the Marafulda. So it's the problem that you're losing some of the oil. I think, just to add my words, so if you know how to add herbs, like the Gemara says, if they would soak it in water first, they would not absorb the oil. Then it would be permitted. But maybe there's another reason. Inami, maybe the reason why the Mishnah does not allow it, oil, prior to it being perfumed, you can eat it. You can anoint yourself with it. Olive oil was the most common cream then. When you make it perfumed, it's good for anointing, but you don't eat it. People don't eat it anymore. So maybe the Marafulda is saying the reason why the Mishnah disallows you to perfume truma oil is because you are limiting the truma. Even though you are upgrading its anointing, it becomes noch aromatic, but you're downgrading its use. You're limiting its use. This is very interesting, and that's called wasting truma. In other words, we're going to see these details, downgrading. If you upgrade the food quality, but you lose some of it, which is also what the first thing is saying. You're losing some of the oil, but you're making it better. The Mishnah says it's asr. That we're going to apply this, and we're going to see whether we're making a good correlation. But you are allowed to make truma wine, spice truma wine. Why is that different? They would add honey, they would add peppercorns to wine. The answer is because whatever they would put in there, they would leave in there. It's important. They wouldn't remove it. Let's go with the Marafuldas first. Even though the peppercorn absorbs some of the wine, But when people would drink the wine, at the end, they would eat it. It's like in the tequila bottle. They put the worms in there. Then they eat it. So you're not losing anything. So mutter. Now, according to the other understanding of the maraful, that's also not a problem because perfumed oil no one consumes. Perfumed wine people consume. Many wines, you go to Iran wines, you'll get all the perfume wines. The smoky wine, the other wine, alagutaz are called yinoi milin. Now, another din, here we have a machlokes, and we quoted this way back when in the beginning of the Masechta. Can you cook? Can you cook? Now, people would cook it, either cooking the wine or they would add it into food. Why not? Now, the Gemara is going to elaborate. What does it mean you're reducing it? One reduction means either the quality goes down, because we're going with the premise that yayin mevushal has less quality than yayin she'ena mevushal, or it means the quantity. Pashut, when you cook something, some of it evaporates. And then the pshat will be even though for you it's better for it to be cooked. So for you, you are upgrading the quality, but you're losing the quantity. So it's very consequential to understand the reason why the Tanakama says you're not allowed to do it, because that has many applications. Now, Rabbi Yehuda is matir. Why does he say it's allowed? Because mipnei shu mashbichai. Mipnei shu mashbichai means that the way the Marafulda says is that cooked wine will last longer. Doesn't go off. So since there is an enhancement in the quality, let's go with that, even though Rabbi Yehuda knows when you cook something, you lose some of the quantity. But you are allowed to enhance the quality by losing the quantity, and that's not called hoicham le'ibud. That's the machlokes between, about whether you're supposed to do outreach. What was the other side's taina? That you might lose something, you might water down something, but then you're adding quality, quantity. The emesis, when you do outreach, you only increase both, but they don't know that. Now maybe they do know that. Okay, Atkan the Mishnah, and now we're going to unpackage everything, every part of the Mishnah. First rule of the Mishnah is that you're not allowed to place a noistan devela v'gregeres. The Mishnah is just telling you the way they did it. We're not speaking about normal figs because that's the way it was. They would either place pressed figs or dried figs. So the Mishnah says you're not allowed to do it because you are ma'abed it. And the way we learned Tamara Fulda, because number one is putting it in there enhances the flavor. So there's nothing wrong with that. The problem is that the way you prepare this dish is not by leaving the figs. You would put the figs, you would squeeze the figs out, and then you would remove the figs, and the figs are now inedible. That is the problem, that you're throwing the figs away. So says the Gemara, what the Mishnah says is not so simple. We have to qualify it because we have a Braisa that says the opposite. Tani, we learned in a Braisa, yes, noistein devela v'groigeres l'toy chamurias. You are allowed to put, whether it is the pressed fig or whether it is the dried fig, into the fish sauce. Kederech daf tzadik ches amud beis, just like you are allowed to place truma spices into fish sauce. Now I want to take a little break and speak about spices. Any item, aside of the fact, vadai, vegetables, including spices and herbs, only have to be tithed rabbinically. Not everyone agrees to. I want to speak about another part of spices. Spices that are not edible do not need to be tithed at all. They are exempt from tithing. Spices that could be eaten on their own, like peppercorn, then even though you're using it for spices, just for the record, they have to be tithed. And that will be very important. So when the Braisa is speaking about that you are allowed to place spices of truma into fish sauce, fish is never truma. Just for the record, many spices will also never be truma, not shayich. If the whole thing is just to add into food, it itself is never eaten as food. Something that's not oichel adam is never going to be chayv in trumas u'maisers. We're speaking about types of spices that are edible, so they have to be tithed. And now you have truma of these spices. Now you want to use them put it into muriyas, and the Braisa says just like you can put spices into muriyas, you can put the dried figs into muriyas. Eloma, the Braisa goes on, but if you're going to put the figs in, don't squeeze them out. Why not? because only when you squeeze them do you get the benefit of getting more juice, but then the figs become inedible. You don't leave them in the fish and you take them out. If you don't squeeze them, the disadvantage is that less of it goes into the fish sauce, but the figs remain edible and you would leave them in. In other words, the point that the Gemara wants to make is that it's not even a stira, because the problem in our Mishnah is that you are taking out the figs. So you have to be a chef. If you are adding the figs ba'oifen, that the ones who really know what they're doing is that they leave the figs in, then why not? Now, can a non-kohen eat it? Of course not. But that's not the topic of our Pedic. It's not about who can eat it. It's about whether you are wasting it or whether you are doing something permissible. Yes, Keva.
Can they be fed to an animal?
Of course not.
Because
Truma.
they're truma still.
Oh yeah, of course not. Yeah, something that's Michael Adam, that's truma, cannot be fed to an animal.
I mean, even though they're not edible after they're squeezed,
they are. If after so now you're first of all, you were not allowed to do it. Now that you did it, I think you could. Maybe b'shoigig b'mezid. If you did it b'mezid, they're going to penalize you not to have benefit. That's what comes to my mind. Okay, and I'm sure we learned it together, Kevin and the Rambam, but we forgot. Okay, we have to learn it again. Now, Vaita the Braisa says ubetavlin regarding spices. Here comes a chiddush. What about if I have a spice? Okay, I don't know. I'm not the chef. I'm just giving my mushal of a peppercorn. Giving this mushal. I went to Lenny's yesterday and I got a steak and I ate something that looked like a cucumber and it was a jalapeno. It just took me a while to chop that it's something sharp. It's like it laid the delayed. It was geferlich. And it was really very good. I love Lenny's. Just I didn't know, so I ate up almost all of it, and I thought it was just hot because the plate was so hot. So I don't know how they do this. You have to know to squeeze it. So here the Braisa says that when it comes to spices, even if you're squeezing the juice out of the spice, a chiddush, which means you're going to discard the spice, you are allowed to do it. Question is why? A new nuance. Shekachu melachton. If the only way this is consumed is by putting it into food and squeezing it, then that's not called ibud. You're using it in its normal manner. Masha'enkein figs don't have to be placed into anything. Figs are edible on their own. You want to put it into the fish brine based on the fact that we don't view it as lahaver zuhama. We view it as that it's nice and tam, which is okay. But then you have to be careful not to discard it. But if it's shekein derech malachton, this is important. Then even though it's truma, you are not discarding it. You're using it the way it's used. I just want to add that l'cho'ira, that based on the holech yelech of the chefs, I think these nuances can change. Depends, like if that's the way a chef uses food, maybe something will be permitted. Even if he's squeezing out the truma product and then discarding it, if that's the way it's always used. Weiter in the Braisa. Tzuroir tavlin, if you have a bundle of truma spices, that you put it into a pot, now what happens is that the pot absorbs it absorbs the spices. And they reused it a second time. You used it twice already. Now, if after you used it twice in bottle tamoy, because it was already cooked twice, there's no more tam in these spices. So Kevin was asking about giving the gregeres to an animal. Play even better. A non-kohen human being can eat it. Mutter. Amazing. Because once spices lose their spiciness, eitz ba'alma. It's like wood. It loses its status of food altogether. So something that's truma, you can argue kedusha lahechan azla. We don't say that because the item, the chefze itself, is a different type of item. It's like a keli is tame. It broke. There's no more tuma. Where did the tuma go? The tuma was in the cup. It's not a cup anymore. Now, but you have to be careful. Just because you used it twice doesn't mean you have to see. But v'im lav, if the flavor is still there, then it's still asur to non kohanim. That's the Braisa. Asks the Gemara. When you learn this Braisa, it sounds like vada using it once won't take all out the flavor. After using it twice, you have to see to it. Ma bein or lebein sheves. Now we have a specific halacha in Masechtas Utzin regarding dill. Many of us know dill. Dill is what you have in the soup that I had in my soup. Something that you never wanted to eat. I never wanted to eat it. Ruined the whole soup. But my mother loved the dill. Everyone has their stuff. Did we not learn in our Mishnah, Hasheves, that once you put dill only once, that sheves is no longer garnish. It's not sheves. Ein ba mishum truma. And not only that, it's like not even food. And therefore, ve'ena mitama with achidik. It can no longer acquire tuma seichlin because it's not food. So what's the problem? The problem is that the Mishnah is telling you that sheves, once you use it one, it's out. So why will this bundle be different after using it twice? Maybe nois and tam. So the Gemara says, Misholcha nasnu lacha. It's an expression. They gave you what's already yours. Your question is a non-question. You should already know the answer, and we already spoke it out. An item that is never edible on its own. Dill. It's not shayach to truma. This whole thing that the sheves truma is a chumrah. So we were very lenient. After it was used once, it's nothing. All of the spices that the Braisa was talking about are spices that are edible on their own. I know that's also a midrabanan. All vegetables is truma midrabanan, but at least it has a din of oichel doiraisa. So therefore, we have to be more mindful. Use it once, use it twice. After twice, still see to it. Let's read it inside. Bedin hoya be'emes when it comes to dill. Since dill is never, I can tell you that. Yeah, dill is terrible. You don't eat dill on their own. So bedin hoya shaloi tetama tumas oichel, because it's not oichel. It's not something, it's never eaten on its own, according to the Gemara. I know people there are thinking it's not true. I eat dill, so you're the anomaly. But you don't count. Ve'hei namru. So the Chachamim were the ones that were machmer that said, no, that it has a din of oichel, and therefore if you separated truma, or maybe you have to midrabanan, it's a very strict thing. So since the whole base is already as beyond the normal standard, only one time it's batal. Spices that our Braisa is talking about is only spices that are also eaten on their own. That's important. Spices that are eaten on their own, and they are also used for spices that has a din of oichel. There, it's a stronger rabbinic truma. So we're saying even in truma de rabbanan there are different levels, and therefore after twice the Braisa can say you have to see into it.
Rabbi, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Why can't you answer simpler and just say that dill, after using it once, it's completely shot? Whereas
I can tell you
other spices, there's a little bit left on the second time. So therefore,
by me, if you use dill 3 times, I'll still be toying the time of dill. I can tell you. If someone doesn't like dill, they'll taste the dill after more than once. B'didi haviyuvda.
I understand. It's a terrible flavor. I agree.
And first of all, it's very geshmak.
Except in pickles. It's good in pickles.
I'm saying there's something in the dill.
Someone got to be moiche here. Dill is amazing.
Dill's amazing. There you go. All right.
In the pickles, it's good.
Okay, next. So the Mishnah said that you cannot put spices into to be mefatim oil, truma oil, but you could put. You can't put figs into the brine, but you can put wine. And we explained because the figs you're taking out, the figs in the Mishnah where you're squeezing it out, the wine you're leaving it in there. Now, says the Gemara that not so simple. Not so simple. I'll tell you what's not so simple. If wine is added, ask the chefs here, why would you add wine into fish brine? If you are only adding it to neutralize odor, if that's the kavana, then it would be asur, even though you're leaving it in it, even though you're going to consume it, because you ruined the wine. Wine was wine. Now it's to neutralize an odor. And really, the Gemara is going to tell you it's a machlekes tanoim. It's amazing how to understand the placement of wine in fish brine. Is it lahaver zuhama and then it's asur? Is it to be nice and tam? Then you're using the wine to add flavor. Then it's mutter. Let's read it inside. Says the Gemara, and now that we already know that, so says Rabbi in the name of Rabbi Yechanan, that our Mishnah is not L'kula Alma. Our Mishnah only reflects the Shita of Rabbeinu HaKadosh, the Rebbe, and we learned this in Abraisa Dotani. Yain Lemurias, he's speaking about Truma wine. The Rebbe is the one that says it's mutter. Aber Rabbi Lozer ben Rab Shimon says that it's asur, because Rabbi Lozer ben Rab Shimon understands it to be only lahaver zuhama. Now, so first of all, our Mishnah is only das yachid. The Gemara is coming to a huge chiddush. Now that we know this argument, and now that we have these oisias, the The machmer will be mekel, and the mekel will be machmer, and it's always that way. So don't think that you're being machmer and you're a big tzaddik, because for most chumras kam kulas. And now the Gemara is going to say, now listen to what happened, because Kevin was on that before. What happens in our case if someone put the wine into the murias? Now think about it. According to Rabbeinu HaKadosh, guys, halkop, you added the wine, not lahaver zuama. You added the wine to add taste, which means that the wine retains its status of wine. So on one hand, there is a leniency that you can put it. But after you put it, it's still wine. You have fish brine, mitabissel wine. And therefore, a non-kohen will not be allowed to eat it. Rabbi Oiser Lazarim, this is great. Now listen to this. According to Rabbi Lazar ben Rab Shimon, he says you're not allowed to add wine into the murias. Why? Because it's lahaver zuama. Okay, and if you did it, you violated the mitzvah saseh of mishmeres terumaisai. They're terrible, but you did it. Since the wine now is not considered a wine, the wine is a neutralizer. Now it's mutter. Wow. And I'll tell you more. The emes is
how is it mutter if
the fish sauce ruins the taste of the wine. Now, according to that, it doesn't ruin the taste of the wine. We don't look at it that way. The wine upgraded the taste of the brine. It's important. This is
not drinkable.
Well, it's mixed in the fish brine, but how do you classify it? I'm curious to ask chefs how they view this. It's mamash machlekes tanoim. How are you looking at it? Again, is the wine ruined or is the brine upgraded?
It should go after the ikar at the end of the day. What are you after?
What the Gemara is saying now is not even up to debate. In other words, we're saying that depending on Rabbi Lazar ben Rab Shimon, lahaver zuama, to be nois and tam, accordingly, the Gemara is saying a chiddush that according to Rabbi Lazar, the big machmer, you can't put wine into fish brine or truma wine. If you did it, a non-kohen can eat it. Now we got a problem on that. And we're going from truma to avodah zara. And as we know, that yayin nesach, wine that was only moved, steered, vadai poured by a goy with the kavana in honor of an idol. Don't think it has to be there's a getchka there and you're feeding the Buddha. No, that they're pouring wine, but they're doing it l'shem avodah zara midoy raisa. That wine is asur bahana. The chachamim then, right, as we learned in Masechtas Avodah Zarah, in the times of the second Beis Hamikdash, they said that even if you don't know that they were menasich et l'shem avodah zarah, yain stam, we are choishish that there was a kavanah l'shem avodah zarah, and therefore wine that belongs to a goy may never be consumed by a Jew, even though the ingredients are kosher. Now, the issue that we are discussing over here is regarding buying murias of goyim, and we learned that a Jew is not allowed to buy murias from a goy, and the reason that we have until now is because in murias some people added wine. It's not vadai, but like we learned in our Mishnah, some people did that. So why can you not buy murias from a goy? Not because you are afraid that the fish is not kosher. We're speaking about where for some reason that you know what fish, kosher fish. Because there might be yayin nesach in there. There might be yayin stam. Problem is, think about it. If adding wine into fish brine, according to Rabbi Lazar ben Rab Shimon, what does it do? It takes away the status of wine. If the wine is trumat smuter luzarim, so the Gemara is going on the premise, so that wine should lose its status of yayin nesach. It's not yayin anymore. It became murias. So oy bazoi frekti Gemara Avmana b'Rab Tanchum boyi. According to the one, which is Rabbi Lazar ben Rab Shimon, that says that if wine was added into murias, a non-kohen can have it because it's their fish sauce ruined the wine, and the whole thing was only lahaver zuama. So murias shall goyim lama aser. Why would it be aser? Even if the goy poured in his wine, even if you know there's wine, the wine loses its status of wine. Answers the Gemara, I'll tell you why. Murias is not because of yayin nesach. Murias is because of bishul akum. Rabbi Yirmi b'shem Rechia barvo mishum bishulei goyim heim asru. That's a rabbinic decree. So here we have a chetimsa that yayin esach is no longer yayin esach if you add it into Murias. Don't go into the wine cast. The Chacham Tzvi, he's the one that we are all soymechan, and no matter how many times the kashrus organizations will make campaigns against it, and for those who want to be machmer gesund to hate, we are very careful not to argue with certain halachic authorities, just to know, including in the Hasidic world, and the Chacham Tzvi that was writing about this was mated it. That's why it's ironic that Hasidim are very machmer, and we're proud about this. Certain areas, when you have people of that stature that said, Rabbi Schusterman says, you'll never get a Hasidic Rav to say that it's us. It's not going to happen. They can't do it. They can say you want to be machmer. Okay, we got a problem with this, but okay, we'll leave off. We'll leave off. We're middle of this. We're not done with this topic yet. God willing, a lot more to continue.
Right, the wine is the alcohol is evaporated already.
The alcohol evaporated. I don't know if it evaporated.
After a few minutes, it evaporates.
When you put the wine into fish brine, it evaporates?
Yes, the alcohol evaporates. So it's not even.
Who says the alcohol has anything to do with it, Kevon?
But the alcohol in the wine, I'm saying. So it's no longer even wine. It's not wine. It's the stuff. It's whatever it is. It's not wine.
If you take non-kosher yayin nesech and then you cook off the alcohol, does that mean you could then consume it?
No,
that's what I'm asking.
You cannot.
Yeah, you're making stuff up here.
Just Michael, the issue with the fish sauce, if we're speaking about fish sauce that has in it truma wine, might be that a non-kohen is having truma. The issue of fish sauce that a goy made might be either because he put non-Jewish wine into it, and that wine a Jew cannot consume, or because the way murias is made is by cooking. And that's a bigger topic, that items that have to be cooked, items that are considered important, that were cooked by a goy, even if we know 1,000,000% the ingredients are kosher, the Chachamim said a Jew cannot partake of it because it can lead into intermarriage, and a lot more to be continued.